Hello everyone, this is Peter Sim. We had a class last night for Introduction to Biblical Interpretation, and there are some questions about disciple versus believer. So I'd like to provide you a few more information based on a couple of books and the Bible text. These are the two books that I'm going to be using throughout the presentation. The first one, the complete book of Discipleship, is by Bill Hall. This has a lot of basic elements of becoming Jesus' follower or disciple. And The Cost by Stephen Lawson, the second one, is basically the exposition of Luke 14 about becoming a follower of Jesus. So the disciple versus believer. As you can see, a disciple in Greek word, it literally means a learner or a follower. So it can mean broadly any followers, all the followers of Christ, or sometimes it means the 12 apostles, the disciples of Jesus, right? And in the second point, it was used in early church as believers. They're referring to all the believers in early church. Therefore, the conclusion, small conclusion here, is a disciple is a reborn follower of Jesus. Let's take a look at some Bible verses here. The first one is, so those who received his word were baptized, and there were added that day about 3,000 souls. So the people who received the word of God become baptized, and they become the follower of Jesus. The second one, same thing in the book of Acts. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. The saved people were added to the church. The third one, also from the book of Acts, but many of those who had heard the word believed. Please note, not everyone, but it says many of those who had heard the word believed. And the number of the men came to about 5,000. Up to this point, it doesn't use the word a disciple. But let's take a look at the following passages. So this one is Acts chapter 6. Now in these days, when the disciples were increasing in number, it's about the situation where there's some issues in church, in Christian early church, and the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples. The 12 are, of course, the apostles, and said, it is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. So they call out all the believers who are the disciples in this passage. And the next one is about Paul going into Jerusalem after he became a Christian. So it says, and when he, Paul, had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, all the believers in Jerusalem. And they were all afraid of him because Paul was persecuting the church before, because they did not believe that he, Paul, was a disciple, meaning they did not believe that Paul was a Christian or believer at this point. So let's take a look at a few more verses. One is from Acts chapter 11. It says, for a whole year they met with the church and taught a great many people. And in Antioch the disciples were first called Christians. This is the first instance of recording of the disciples or believers are called as Christians. So based on all the evidences, all the passages that we looked at so far, the disciples, the believers, and Christians, they're all the same. And Bill Hall also said that he finds no biblical evidence for a separation of Christian from disciple, which is already mentioned in different places based on our evaluation of different passages. I agree with him 100% here. So what does it mean to be a disciple? Let's take a look at few more verses here. The first one is Luke 14, which we discussed yesterday. The first one, verse 26, it doesn't literally mean that you have to hate your family members or any other loved ones in your life. What it means is Jesus is number one priority. There's a little issue about talking about this priority wording here, but simply put, he has been number one in your life. That's all it is. The second part, the verse 27, let's take a look at another verse to see what it really means. It's from Mark chapter 8, verse 34. It says, "And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, 'If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me.'" I explained to you about taking up the cross yesterday, but let him deny himself. Denying yourself is only possible if you put away your ego, your self-centeredness, your own interest. Because you are the servant of Christ, then you have to look up to Jesus and get his instruction instead of your own desire or your own wanting in your lives. And Bill Hall gave us this list of things that the disciple is not. So let's take a look at this one. It's not a program, it's not a production line, not just for beginners or for leaders, not just for the highly literate, and not just for people who like structure. So basically it's indicating that it's not about something that we see, but it's about all the Christians who believe in Jesus, who are supposed to follow Jesus, that are the disciples. And Bill Hall also put some issues that we face in today's churches. This is a direct quote from his book. He said, "The American gospel teaches that faith equals agreement with a set of religious facts. Believing without discipleship isn't believing. It's agreeing to a set of facts about a religious figure." In parentheses, I put Jesus there. He's right, because if you don't really feel or know that you're a disciple of Christ, your life cannot be transformed. And the person who is born again is the only people who can follow Jesus as the Bible commands. And let's look at some other information about Stephen Lawson. In the cost, he said that no one can follow Jesus until they first hear the truth. This is so important because in the pulpit, you have to preach the gospel biblically. What the Bible teaches, it has to be proclaimed. Teachers and pastors, they have to teach the right doctrine or sound doctrine to the congregants. Once they receive Jesus as their Lord, they can follow Jesus. Second bullet point, Jesus will not follow us. We are called to follow Jesus. That is so true again. A lot of times we're confused that Jesus will do whatever we want him to do, but that's not the case. We're supposed to be following his instruction, his command, so we can do the things that he asks us to do. The third bullet point is Jesus is the one who sets the term for following him. Period. The rest of it you can read it on your own. Nobody can come with their own terms to follow Jesus. Okay, Jesus, I'm going to do this and do that and then follow you. If you can do this for me, then I can follow you. Those are the things that we misunderstand what it means to follow Jesus. But Stephen Lawson clearly states that that cannot happen. The Bible clearly shows the requirements are fixed by Jesus Christ. And we had another question about Simon. It was a separate question from disciple and believer, but this one was mentioned in Book of Acts, chapter 8, and unfortunately, the Bible only says that he was a magician in Samaria. Other than that, we don't really have much information about this person. And just so you know, the Simon in Greek name is actually a variation or capturing of the Hebrew name Simeon. So it was one of those popular names in the first century. For example, I gave you this Bible verse in Matthew chapter 13, verse 55, one of Jesus' brother's name was Simon. Just a side note, but Simon literally means flat-nosed. Flat-nosed, right? And that's all I have for today. So if you have more questions, just email me, text me. I'll send you additional information as needed. And this is my first time to try this one this way. So the recording wise, the voice and everything, it may not have been perfect, or not even close to that actually. Choppy and here and there, a lot of cutting and different things. So please let me know what you think about this, whether it was helpful, and we'll see how it goes, and I'll improve in the future. Thank you and good night.